Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to look at Guardian of the Galaxy Volume 3 and my reaction to it overall, as well as timeline placement. Now, there will be spoilers for the movie, so if you haven't seen it yet, definitely make sure to go check it out first. But assuming you've seen the movie, then let's dive right in and see what we can find out. All right, so I'm really happy that fans seem to agree that it's a fantastic movie. 96% Rotten Tomatoes, that's great. 80% critics, I think that's a little low, but the critics have been pretty tough on all superhero movies, let alone Marvel. So I'll take 96 any day of the week. And boy, did Marvel need a hit. It's been a rough couple years for Marvel. Some people consider it much rougher than I do. I don't think it's been as bad as people make it out to be, but it's objectively speaking, it's been rough. So they needed this win. Very happy. Great movie. Really loved it. So I had made a video on my predictions for who might survive and who might die. You can see my percentages there. I was pretty sure the top two rows were going to make it. I mean, Groot's already died once. Gamora's already died once. Technically, Nebula even died once, the 2014 version. I knew they weren't going to kill anybody up there. But I wouldn't have been surprised if Drax, Star-Lord, and Rocket all died. I was sure Rocket was going to die. So kudos to Gunn and Marvel for really tricking us. I mean, it was tense. The whole movie, I'm like, oh, they're dead. Oh my gosh, they're still alive. I can't believe it. No, they're dead. I mean, they had so many fake outs. That bottom row had multiple times they faked us out. So some people might actually be disappointed, I guess. I mean, it's weird to think you might be disappointed someone didn't die. But I give Marvel credit. They upped the, think about it too. The interviews. People gave interviews. Each of them, Pratt and Batista and even Bradley Cooper made it sound like he was done doing Rocket. They really, really made you think they were going to die. Very well done, Marvel. You fooled me. And at the end of the day, I'm glad they all lived. Very cool. I will say, though, it was a bummer to have Rocket injured for most of the movie. He's my favorite character. He's hysterical. And, I mean, other than the very beginning and the very end, we saw him in flashbacks, yes, but the adult Rocket was out of the picture. And I guess for me, that might be what knocks it a little lower than Guardians 1. Guardians 1 is my favorite. And then Guardians 2 and Guardians 3, I would put just a touch underneath. And the reason is because both Guardians 2 and Guardians 3 didn't have the core team together for most of the movie. That's why I loved Guardians 1, is they were all together, mostly, all together the whole movie. But anyway, I do think it hurt the movie a little bit that we didn't get more of adult Rocket, but that's okay. It's a minor nitpick. Loved the movie. I also thought that this animal cruelty that people were saying we were going to see, I was really worried. I was worried for what I was going to see. I don't think it was as bad as people said. Granted, it was sad, extremely sad. The deaths of some of the animals, oh my goodness, that was painful. And seeing poor Rocket like this, that's painful. I just mean, people made it seem like it was going to be a horror show, you know, and it wasn't that bad to me. What I did love, though, and tell me if you got the same impression, I thought that one of the reasons High Evolutionary hated Little Rocket so much is because Rocket ended up being smarter than him. I mean, how fascinating that the creator made the creation smarter. I think that's part of why he hated him so much. I mean, yeah, he wanted him back to steal his brain. I think he hated him, too. So, interesting. Let me know what you think about that. But I think one thing, though, we're going to have to do some headcanon work on is this Lila Easter egg from the original Guardians movie. You can see highlighted over there, associates, Groot, and Lila. So part of what made Lila's death so painful for me is I assumed she was going to make it out alive and maybe die at some point, but make it out alive because she and Rocket were supposedly associates. So could this be that James Gunn just made a mistake? Sure, it could. But I think the headcanon is that Rocket was so devastated from losing his friends, particularly Lila, that every time he was arrested, he mentioned Lila. Well, you're never going to get her. Ha ha, you didn't catch her. You know, she's going to get away. And he was doing it out of pain, out of the pain of losing her that he couldn't accept she wasn't there. So he almost talked about her so much that it was like she was still there. So that led them to now say she was one of his associates. I don't know quite else how to explain it. So let me know what you think in the comments about that. But yeah, in a way, it makes it all the more tragic. Whether Gunn intended it or not, yeah, really depressing, honestly. And just building more of this backstory for Rocket and his pain. All right, so another question for you. Do you think Groot really spoke? At the end, I about jumped out of my seat when he didn't say "I am Groot." It just talked to everybody. I think, though, the fact that no one reacted, I mean, no one seemed to care, that means that they were basically, I was Gunn, basically saying, I want you, the audience, to understand Groot in the way that everybody else understands him. Which, if that's what it was, that's very cool. Now, on the remote chance that he actually spoke, let me know what you think, if you think that's the case. But I think Gunn was just letting us in on how they understand Groot, which was very cool. Very cool. All right, so speaking of, what about this new team? Who's on this new team? Obviously, these are some captured photos from the end credit scene. And look at Groot. He is so huge. I talked in other videos, and we'll talk a little later in this one about Groot's growth patterns and how I don't think people should be putting so much credence in being able to predict when movies are placed in the timeline based on how big he is. Look at him. He's huge there. He's huge. So at some point, he just hit tree puberty. That's the bottom line. Whatever tree puberty is, he hit it and hit it in spades. But anyway, the new team, Groot, we see Kraglin back there. Rocket, obviously, leading the team. Very cool. Cosmo was awesome in the movie. Didn't get a lot to do, but every scene Cosmo was in was fantastic. Warlock, obviously, a member of the team now. And, some people didn't like him as well. I would say if you were somebody who really, really wanted the Warlock from the comics, you were disappointed. This was absolutely not the Warlock from the comics. But he was still really cool. If you move past that and accept that this is the MCU's version of him, he was very cool. I'll tell you, though, I had real trouble getting out of my mind Will Poulter from Meet the Millers. On the right there, that's Will Poulter from 2013. And on the left, that's Will Poulter from 2024. Boy, that just shows how time can really change a person. For better or for worse. In this case, for the better. My goodness. By the way, if you've never seen Meet the Millers, really funny movie. Well worth checking out. But he is as nerdy as the day is long in that movie. So, yeah, it was a little hard to think of him as Warlock and not as Kenny was his name in the movie. Kenny. So, yeah, too funny. And then also, the last member, probably the biggest surprise, was Phyla Vell. Now, I think in the end credits, they just called her Phyla. But who is this Phyla Vell? Well, the only thing we know from the movie is that earlier she's the one on that treadmill running around in circles. So obviously she's a creation of the High Evolutionary, that he's done something to her. So really that's all we have to go off from the movie. Now, if we look in the comics, she was actually the daughter of Marvel, the original Captain Marvel, the one that Annette Bening was playing, gender swapped in the first Captain Marvel movie. And you can see a couple different versions there of his original costume, look more Kree-like with the green, and then his newer costume. But in addition to Phyla Vell being the daughter of Marvel, or having some of his genes, maybe not daughter as much, there's also some Eternals background. So she's a little bit of everything. Now, she first appeared in 2003's Captain Marvel, issue 16, and then even took on the name of the new Captain Marvel. There have been so many Captain Marvels in the comics. So it does make people wonder, maybe she'll show up in the Marvels, even in a small role. I doubt it. I think she's too young and it wouldn't make much sense. But it's just one more character that kind of has a bond. The now 4 women that all kind of share this bond. But yeah, she's had some amazing costumes, really, really, really cool. Really looking forward to what her future is going to be. And the fact that she's so young makes me wonder, where they're going to go with the story, and are they going to be, raising her, or is she really much more mature than she seems? Maybe she's got a smarter intelligence because of the High Evolutionary. Just a lot to explore. So very interesting. That was a real surprise. And so was Blurp. Honestly, Blurp was a bit of a surprise too. I don't know where that came from, but I'm all for it, man. Give me more Blurp. I need more Blurp in my life. So then the question too is, who else might join? I'm sure this isn't all that's ever going to be on the team. It's who's on the team right now. So is it possible Star Fox might join? I mean, he's looking for someone to hang out with after Eternals. Is it possible Love and or Thunder? But certainly Love Might she join? She's the same age as Phyla-Vell, approximately. So those two might really bond together well. Whether Thor would actually join, I don't know. Not real sure I'd even want that. Although Beta Ray Bill has joined in the comics. So, yeah, lots of possibilities. I have a feeling we're not going to see the Guardians for a while, that they're going to be off doing their own thing, and then either in Kang Dynasty or certainly by Secret Wars, we'll see them back again. But yeah, it'd be great to have Little Love join up with Phyla-Vell. So what about the rest of the team? The ones that aren't part of the core Guardians? Well, Gamora left to go join the Ravagers again, which was a good way to finish her story. It looked like maybe they were going to have her and Star-Lord get back together, but I'm glad they didn't. It made a lot more sense for her to just take off and go live a different life. And plus, Zoe Saldana has said she doesn't want to do Gamora anymore, so kind of makes sense. Now, Nebula and Drax are off on nowhere. So Nebula is running nowhere, and Drax, actually I don't know where he is, but he's basically raising the kids, which is cool. Since he lost his own daughter, that's kind of neat for him to be a dad again. I was a little bummed though that he didn't take off with Mantis. To see that duo split up is a bummer, but I think they got some big plans for Mantis. In the comics, she becomes something called the Celestial Madonna, and with her ties to Ego, and maybe some of her powers are still there. I know Star-Lord's aren't, but maybe hers still are somehow. It's just interesting. There's so much they can do with that character. And speaking of Star-Lord, he went back home to Earth. It was kind of cool. Nice finish for him to go back to Earth and be with his grandpa and who knows what else. I mean, one thing we know for sure, though. He will return. They made that clear. It's kind of interesting. They just said Star-Lord will return. So are they implying it's going to be in a solo story? I guess that's possible. Or is it just he's going to return, maybe joining the Avengers or something like that? Who knows? But this was very interesting for them to focus just on him. But I appreciate them letting us know, basically, that they're coming back. We're going to see the Guardians again. We're going to see Star-Lord again. So not for a while. I'm betting it's going to be several years. But they'll be back. All right, so when does this story happen in the timeline? When does it happen in the timeline? Well, we know it's after the holiday special because they got nowhere in the holiday special and make some references even to the holiday special. So it's after that. What more can we learn, though? Well, let's look at the overall timeline for the Guardians. We have in 2014 their first two adventures. We have them then showing up in Infinity War, obviously in Endgame, Thor: Love and Thunder, and I'm going to talk more about that October date because I have done some revisions with that. That's when Disney Plus says it is. I don't like it in October, but we'll talk more about that. And then the holiday special in December of 2025. Okay, so we talked about Groot's growth patterns. You know how he was a little baby in Guardians, end of Guardians 2 and end of Guardians 1 and most of Guardians 2. He was a teenager in Infinity War. He still was kind of a teenager in Love and Thunder, which is interesting. And again, Disney Plus says it's in October 2025. And then he swole Groot suddenly in the holiday special. Now, while I do think that's a huge growth spurt for 2 months, again, look at how big, though, he was in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. There's just no predicting this guy's growth patterns. That's the bottom line. However, I've mentioned this before, so I want to reiterate again. I think Disney Plus is placing Love and Thunder based on when Korg is retelling the story to his audience here, to all these kids. That one kid in the lower right looks pretty bored, but most of them are pretty interested. So he's telling the story in October of 2025, but the story itself could have happened earlier. So I think rather than the main part of the story happening in October 2025, I think it's in May. I think May fits perfectly. It's after Jane goes to New Asgard and finds the hammer, etc. And notice then we have a nice solid, 6-7 months in between Thor: Love and Thunder and the holiday special. Hopefully the timeline book is going to resolve all this, but I'm going to say May because I think that just makes more sense. So the story's being retold in October, but the main part of it happens in May. Okay. Oh, also, the holiday special, I think this is interesting. Kraglin refers to Groot as just a kid. He says, oh, Groot, he's just a kid. So I think he's a teenager still. He's an older teenager. He's hit puberty, but I don't think he's very old. I think he just hit a big growth spurt. All right, but this still doesn't tell us when the Guardians 3 is happening in relation to Holiday Special. It's all interesting. It's all good continuity, but it doesn't tell us when it happens. Okay, so in the movie, Nebula and Mantis are discussing Gamora. And Mantis mentions her being, dead. I thought she was dead. And Nebula's like, no. She just doesn't remember the last few years. Which, that confused me of what she was talking about at first. But I think what she's saying is just, it was awkward dialogue, but I think she was just trying to say she jumped forward 9 years. She jumped from 2014 to 2023. So it's not just she doesn't remember it, she wasn't part of it, but she's been gone now for 2 years. So I guess it could be referring to how long since they've seen Gamora in Avengers Endgame, but I really think they were just trying to remind us this is not the same Gamora that we saw in Guardians 1 and 2. She died in Infinity War, and then the one from 2014 jumped forward to 2023. So I guess once it comes out on Disney Plus, I'll revisit those lines again, and maybe they'll tell me more information. But I'm pretty sure all they were doing was just trying to help us understand the situation Gamora was in. So that means we still don't have anything. Okay, well, let's look at Star-Lord's age, because there is something really cool, a couple really cool things in the movie that Gunn does. So first of all, I believe that Ego in Guardians 2 met with Meredith for the first time, because he said he did it multiple times, met with her multiple times, in 1978. I think in 1980, he met with her, and they had little Peter Quill was conceived. Not born yet, but conceived. And then this was interesting. I mentioned this in a flashback video, the earlier video I did the other day, how even James Gunn jumped and said, hey, at the beginning here, when I did my little flashback and said 1980, he says, look, I don't know how many people have asked me this, but guys, a pregnancy is only 9 months, and she could already be pregnant at the start of Guardians 2. So I think what he was trying to say was, she's pregnant at this point. But as we see, as they're driving in the car, and more importantly, as they're walking in the woods, she's not very pregnant, right? I mean, that is not much of a baby bump there. So we're maybe talking 8 months pregnant. Why is that all important? Because then we later learn in 1988, that's when Peter Quill is taken from Earth, cries out to his mom. And then what's so cool in Guardians 3, we now learn exactly how old he was. We could have done the math before, but it's nice that James Gunn pulls it all together, because Peter Quill screams at at Nebula that I was 8 years old when I left Earth. And that's perfect, right? Because if he was conceived in early 1980, maybe late 1979, then he was probably born in, September-ish time frame, and therefore he could easily be 8 in 1988. So I just want to say thank you, James Gunn, for actually watching your earlier movies so that you get the age right. Peyton Reed, you could learn something. You could learn something from James Gunn. I'm just saying. I'm not going to go into my rant. I promise. I'm not going to rant. I'm just saying, hey, Peyton, talk to James Gunn. He knows how to actually watch the movies that came out before and be consistent with them. I'm just saying. Anyway, so still though, that doesn't help us yet. But then there's this interesting line that's kind of mumbled, to be honest. It's a little hard to tell what he was saying. It sounded like, to me at least, when I left the theater, I thought he had said, Star-Lord said, he's 45 in this end credit scene. Okay, well, that's really helpful. If he's 45, we know he was born in 1980, so that puts us in after his birthday in 2025. So, sometime in 2026. Okay, that helps. But it did make me stop and go, wait, 45? He was blipped. Why is he adding 5 years if he was blipped? So put this on pause for a second, because we're going to come back to this. But this is really an interesting question. How do people handle their age in the MCU? Okay, so let's look and see how other people have handled their age in the MCU. Well, we got Bucky. Bucky says in Falcon and the Winter Soldier that he is 106. Okay. Well, we learned from the Winter Soldier, Captain America the Winter Soldier, he was born in 1917. Well, you can do that math, and that puts us into 2024 if he's, not yet hit his birthday in 2024. Obviously, he added the blip years. But really, number one, he was probably joking, first of all. And second of all, he's adding way more than just the blip years. Remember, he was frozen on ice and then unfrozen to go and kill people as a Winter Soldier, frozen, unfrozen, multiple times. That's why he still looked young. So he's adding way more than just blip years. So I don't think we can really take Bucky as an example of how ages are handled with the blip in the MCU. A better example is in Far From Home when Flash Thompson, goes ahead and gets some alcohol, and then he gets busted by MJ, who says, "Hey, he was blipped, so technically he's 16, not 21." Now notice she says technically, but I think, this is not something people can just say whatever they want. The government is going to jump in and make some decisions here because good old Flash, who's losing his drink there, is a good example of the reason your age matters. Like before you're 21, there's all kinds of different thresholds. When can you vote? When can you get married? Sign legal docs, drive, drink, carry a gun. For that matter, when can you go see Deadpool 3 without a parent or guardian? All of these things are age-based. So just because an extra 5 years went by while you were blipped, you haven't physically aged. So whatever the reasons are that we're saying as a society, you can't do any of these things until you hit a certain age, that hasn't changed just because you blipped. So I do think it's not technically that he can't say he's 21. I don't think legally he can say he's 21. And you might say, oh, is it just for teenagers? No, senior citizens. Sorry, Hank, I'm using you as an example. Your age determines when you can get Medicare, when you can draw Social Security, when you can withdraw from your IRAs, when you can get your senior discount at Denny's. Yum, yum, yum. I mean, Denny's ain't going to give you no discount if you're not really the right age. So the point there is the government isn't going to let you you can say whatever your age is that you want, but the bottom line is, what does your driver's license say? In fact, speaking of that, how do they handle that? Because your driver's license right now normally just has your date of birth. That's not enough anymore. It almost needs like a special stamp on it that says, no, was blipped. So that they know you can't rely on the date of birth. You have to rely on the date of birth and whether they were blipped. And what about gravestones? Now, this person died in 2011, but what if that had been 2021? Is there going to be some asterisks so you know that they were blipped? Oh, it wouldn't be 2021 because they were gone. How about 2025? Are we going to try to help somebody know that they're not really as old as it seems? It's just really interesting. I don't think this has ever been discussed in the MCU other than through the jokey things that I mentioned. I really want to know, how do they handle something as important as your age? Anyway, enough of this digression. I hope you found it interesting. I certainly thought this was interesting. But let's go back to this line again. So someone actually recorded the movie with closed captions, and the mumbling that we couldn't quite understand is now quite clear. So Star-Lord is saying, he's talking about a next door neighbor who's lazy. He's going to sit on the porch and watch me do it, referring to mowing the lawn, like he's a 45-year-old man, able-bodied, and I'm mowing his lawn. So actually, we didn't get anything after all. He didn't say he's 45. We know he's not 50 because there's the earlier joke in the movie about, people die in their 50s. But he's not saying he's 45. So we don't know his age. So then we have nothing? Do we walk away with nothing from the movie? No. Actually, in this same scene is the best information we get. Notice the newspaper article says, alien abduction, Kevin Bacon shares all. Now, I'm going to also bet that when we can zoom in and enhance, that we're going to see a date on there. I mean, that would be so cool if they actually have like 2026 on the newspaper. So we'll see. We'll have to wait until we can get something a little more clear, because I tried to zoom in and enhance and it just is, impossibly blurry. But here's the key. I would think that a story that Kevin Bacon shares about being abducted for the holiday special would happen within a few months of it actually occurring, right? I mean, sure, he's going to take some time to decide, do I want to share this story or not? And then he's going to try to make as much money as he can off of it, selling it to the highest bidder. And then eventually it's going to make it into the local newspapers like the St. Charles Post. But so I think the latest we could go is early spring. And we can see out the window, things are growing outside, so it's obviously not winter, it's not freezing cold, but it doesn't mean it's summer either. So I'm going to say, therefore, my prediction for the timeline at this point is April. I'm going to go with April of 2026. And I think that makes the most sense based on what little we've seen. And then hopefully that newspaper article will have a date on it. So that'll be cool. All right, so that means now we wait and see for it to show up in Disney Plus. This is everything from Disney Plus, and here's what's interesting too. I think it's going to be a while before we know for certain when in 2026 it happens, because the next several things are all going to be in 2025. I think Secret Invasion is in 2025. I think, Loki season 2 is going to follow Loki season 1, and maybe even the Marvels. I'm not sure. I could go either way with the Marvels being in late 2025 or sometime in 2026. But I mean, it may not be until next year that anything shows up on the Disney Plus timeline in the 2026 timeframe for us to date it. So very interesting. We may be guessing for a while. So let's hope that newspaper has something helpful in it. So then here is the updated timeline image, and I've put this out on the Google Drive, and I'll have a pinned comment that has a link to the Google Drive in case you want to download a new image. And of course, I'll also have a pinned comment that tells you how to join the Discord server. You can see here is our spoiler channel with a lot of redacted stuff. So yeah, lots of fun on the Discord channel discussing everything Marvel, but as well as DC, Star Trek, Doctor Who, on and on, Star Wars, you name it. So I pinned comment with a link so you can join. And also, if you don't mind, like this video. You can subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we can all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-expanding Marvel Cinematic Universe.